We're now live, Chair.
Thank you very much, Kirsty. So thank you, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the January meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Board. Good to see you all, and from a personal point of view, good to be back. And thank you to Stephen for chairing the October meeting in my absence. I suspect we've probably got a fair number of apologies and substitutes this morning. I know Neil from ICB has indicated he'll be joining us later because of other meetings. I'm aware lots of people will have pressures on the time at this point and may well need to drop in and out, so understand that, and that's absolutely fine. Obviously, this meeting is taking place at a time when our system is under quite I mean, the word unprecedented is getting overused these days, isn't it? Because everything seems to be unprecedented, but it absolutely is. And situations that we've never seen before, and hopefully we're not see again. So I think we should just start by recording our thanks to all of the staff who are working so hard to keep things going in these amazingly difficult situations. I think for me, just sort of particularly aware that for all staff, this must be a hugely stressful time, and for some actually very traumatic as well in terms of some of the experiences. And, I want us to reflect, and it's perhaps something we'll pick up more in the next Health and Care Leaders meeting, on whether there's anything more we can do in terms of supporting staff and staff morale through this, because I fear that if we don't, the impact on services going forward is going to be dramatic. But at this point, I think it's really important that we, again, place on record our thanks, appreciation and understanding to just what everyone in the system is having to cope with and is doing at this time. So if I move us on to the agenda, item 1 as any substitutes. Mark, I'm not aware of any. Are there any substitutes?
No, there's no substitutes, Chair. And obviously the only apology we've received is from Neil Smurthwaite, who will be joining us a little bit later.
Thank you. Item 2, I just remind members to declare any pecuniary interests. And then item 3, admission of the public, just to remind people that although we're meeting online, obviously this is a public meeting. The public and press are able to watch through Zoom. And there are no confidential items, so there's no points where we need to exclude press and public. Item 4 is minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of October. So can I just ask if colleagues who are there any questions or comments on these, or are people happy for them to be agreed as a correct record? I'm seeing some nods. I'm not seeing any indications to the contrary, so I will take it that we can approve those and move on. Item 5 is question time. And again, not aware of any, but Mark, can I just double check with you that there are no questions?
No, Chair, we've not received any questions for question time.
Thank you. In that case, then item 6 is the refresher of the West Yorkshire Partnerships 5-year strategy. And can I welcome Ian Holmes from the partnership team to introduce this item.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Swift, and hi everyone. My name is Ian Holmes. I'm the Director of Strategy and Partnerships for the West Yorkshire Integrated Care Board. You'll remember that myself and Esther joined you in this meeting. I think it was in the autumn time when we were talking about the process to refresh our strategy, to get your views and thoughts of what that should include. And we're coming back today to share a first draft of that strategy. And again, just to test with you whether it feels like it's in the right place and whether it captures your priorities and feedback that you provided to us. As Councillor Swift said, it feels like an interesting time, doesn't it, to be having a conversation about a 5-year strategy, given the huge pressures that all parts of the health and care system are under at the minute. I guess, my hope would be that if we can really focus on the transformation elements of this, integration of services in communities, stronger focus on prevention and inequalities, those are the sort of things that might mean in the future we're not quite in the situation that we are currently in. So there's a clear connection to me in terms of getting the strategy right and developing a health and care service that is really resilient and responsive to the pressures that we face. I guess sort of three things by way of introduction to the strategy. The first one, and we touched on this in the autumn, is that we've really worked hard to build this with places, with colleagues in Calderdale. Debbie Graham's been really heavily involved. Debs Harkin's been really heavily involved, and we want to try and include a really clear sort of connectivity between the West Yorkshire strategy and the Calderdale health and wellbeing strategy. So that's the first thing. Does it feel like it's got the right ingredients in it from a Calderdale perspective, and can you see the alignment with your strategy and priorities? The second thing that's really important is that we work really hard to maintain a sense of continuity between this strategy and the previous one that we published in 2019. What we've heard really clearly from all partners is actually this constancy of purpose during difficult times is really, really important. People thought the first strategy was pretty good. They thought the 10 ambitions that we described were in the right area. And so we've kind of deliberately tried to maintain that continuity. And that's why we're describing this as a refresh rather than a rewrite. So hopefully you'll see that in the document too. The third thing I'd say is that we know the context has changed though, and we know the context has got significantly more challenging over the last 3 years. We published a document in February 2019. A month later, we went into the first lockdown as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Since then, we've been, we've had that period of in and out of lockdown. We've seen the impact of that on waiting times for elective services, and we're now seeing huge pressures relating to all aspects of services, really, including the urgent and emergency care system. So one of the things that's a really clear feature of the health and care system that probably wasn't as prevalent in 2019 is people are waiting a lot more time for planned care. It's more difficult to get urgent and emergency care in a time frame that people need. The challenges around access to primary care as well. There's significant workforce challenges which are even more prevalent than they were in 2019. And we're now dealing with issues of poverty, which unfortunately are more significant than they were 3 years ago as well. So the context has really changed. I think we've tried to reflect that in the sort of the tone of the document and the priorities in the document, while maintaining that focus around integration, prevention, inequalities, and the 10 big ambitions that describe that. So as I said, we discussed this at the partnership board in December, and Councillor Swift chaired that meeting too. So nice bit of continuity there. I think it was broadly well received by the partnership board and broadly in line with what their hopes were. We received good comments about we probably need to strengthen the role of digital and digital as an enabler for transformation. There's something about the tone of the document and about what it means to be a northern integrated care system, and the role that we want to play as a northern integrated care system to support economic growth, addressing inequalities, and really looking at the sort of the role of the health and care partnership as an anchor institution to support economic growth, given the relationship between health and wealth. People are really keen to see measurement against the 10 ambitions. You'll see we've included a bit of a summary of where we've got to against those 10 big ambitions over the first 3 years. And as you'll see, a lot of those things have got a lot more difficult, particularly around inequalities ambitions. But that point of measurement is really important. So what we're doing between now and the next partnership board meeting, which is at the beginning of March, is continue to refine and tweak the document. That's why I'm here today, to get your views either now on the call, or please do feel free to send me in any email contributions after the meeting as well. That would be fantastic. And we'll look to get this document finalised and taken back to the partnership board in March. In parallel with that, we are now entering what we're calling the joint forward planning process in the NHS operational planning process. So what we're doing off the back of this strategy is developing an NHS joint forward plan, which describes the sort of the NHS contribution to the delivery of this strategy, recognising that this is broader than just the NHS. And we'll be working with places and partners between now and June to develop that joint forward plan, in line with the sort of the planning guidance that came out just before Christmas. So really grateful to be here, really keen to hear views and thoughts, either now Councillor Swift or also, electronically.
Thanks very much, Ian. Aware from the decision of the partnership board, it can be quite a difficult strategy to comment on in a meeting like this without getting into a lot of detail, because it's hard to sort of encapsulate everything the system does and at the same time keep a manageable set of priorities. But having said that, does anybody want to comment or raise views? I suppose what sort of particularly interested in is whether, and I guess part of the reason for coming here is whether we're being sure that we feel this aligns with our own priorities and visions for what we need in Calderdale, and I suppose making sure also that we feel it genuinely reflects the patient voice, patient experience, and how that's built into the planning going forward. But
yeah, and I mean, on the patient voice and patient experience point, Councillor Swift, we received a detailed report from the 5 Health Watch organisations across West Yorkshire at the September Partnership Board. So we've built an approach where we say this is what the data are telling us, this is what partners are telling us, this is what citizens and members of the public are telling us. And we've used that to try and inform the refresh of the strategy. And I know Calderdale Health Watch have been active within that alongside of the other partners, and that document's available, and I can send that to you if helpful. I mean, it covers the things that you'd expect. People are really concerned about access to services, particularly primary care services, elective services, dental services, and so on and so forth. So, but we have really tried to stay true to that feedback and make sure we reflected that in the document.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you to Health Watch for the work they've done. That was an excellent report. Are there any points or comments anybody wants to feed in at this point? If not, I think Julie, yes.
Thanks, Councillor Swift. Yeah, just a few quick comments. I really like the metrics. I like the visual approach of it. I think it's really clear to see the direction of travel. And of course, it's a very high level strategy looking at the whole of West Yorkshire. But looking at this, Ian, and then looking at the early years strategy that we're going to look at in the board coming up later on the agenda, it's very strong on what communities and people can do for themselves. And I wonder whether the West Yorkshire strategy could include some of that. It's very strong on voice and what people are telling us, but it's very service centric. It's about access to services, people can be able to get what they want when they want. But I wonder if there's something in there a little bit missing around our own responsibility, because we know with waiting lists, people are not going to get seen as soon as they need to be. What can people do to look after their own health? I know it's looking at, from that kind of West Yorkshire ICB level, but thinking about the use of pharmacy and other places, where you can, and what you can do, to remain healthy and active. I just wonder whether there's something a little bit missing around that, whether it just needs a little bit of that joint responsibility of what we can do for ourselves as well, living in West Yorkshire. So it's just a comment, but I really like the metrics. I think they're great.
Do you want me to come back in, Councillor Swift?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's really helpful, and this is why a fresh pair of eyes is always really helpful, Julie. So thank you very much. I think that we can add stuff into balance. That's absolutely part of this. How we support people to stay healthy and well without needing access to services is a key part of this. And if that doesn't come across as strongly as it could do, then that's really helpful feedback. I mean, if Mark or Mike could ping me across your report, that'd be helpful. We might just pinch a little bit with pride from it.
Yeah, it's just in our action plan. We've just got at the top, what we're going to do with community services and communities in the partnership, and what communities are going to do for themselves, what people are going to do for themselves. And there is a lot that people can do. So that's great, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you. I just realised I do tend to chair online quite informally, but perhaps for people at home, perhaps the first time people speak, then just say what their background is. So Julie is the Director of Children's Services for Calderdale. I'll go next to Josh.
Yeah, Josh Van Glen, Cabinet Member for Adult Services and Wellbeing in Calderdale. It's a great strategy in terms of the ambition. I was thinking particularly about, I think, Ambition 1 and Ambition 3 when I was reading through it. And I think those are the ones, the ones on like trying to make sure that we're reducing the impact of inequality. And I think, we've got specific numbers on there. So 5% on one, and I think it was 10% on the children's outcomes. And I just wonder what we are going to do to kind of mitigate for exogenous impacts, so things that we don't have control over. So if inequality is going up and up and up, then we might reduce the impact of inequality. Yet if there is more inequality, there remains that problem. And I just wonder if that's something we kind of factored in when we were coming up with these ambitions. Not that I'm against difficult ambitions, but just kind of thinking through how more generally we mitigate for that and understand that.
Yeah, I mean, it looks heroic, doesn't it? Given what's happened previously, and as you say, there's things that are within our control, and there's things that are outside of our control. And while I think as a partnership we have got a strong voice upwards, there's clearly a sort of a national kind of fiscal and policy context, I suppose, that's likely to make this more difficult over the next few years. I think one of the conversations we've had in partnership boards is around just being sort of a bit more explicit, Councillor Fenton, about what we think those external conditions for success are. I think we also need to do a bit of calibration about what's ambitious but realistic in terms of those sort of inequalities trajectories. So again, it's really helpful feedback.
Thank you. Anna, come to you next.
Thank you. My name's Anna Basford. I'm Deputy Chief Executive at Calderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust. And mine was just a positive confirmation around support for the strategy and the points that you've raised in particular, Ian, around the consistency with the previous strategy, and that it continues to give that real focus around top priorities on climate change, economic growth, and around addressing inequalities, which, as you've said, should have a direct impact on helping to build sustainable, resilient communities. So just to give a positive feedback on the strategy in the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Ashley.
Thanks, Chair. Ashley Evans, Ward Councillor for Worley Ward in Calderdale. I'd like to echo Julie's comments in terms of the graphics and the metrics and so on. It's good to see those, and it's good to see specific targets in the Ambition 1 in terms of the 5% reduction on things. I'm a great believer in having specific targets and timescales by which they will be achieved. Those are very obvious and very specific in Ambition 1. I'm struggling to find anything quite so specific in some of the other ambitions. Have I missed them? If so, my apologies. Just be interested to hear your views on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. Ian, is there anything?
You haven't missed them. The reality of this, Councillor Evans, is that some of these things are more easy to measure than others. The classic one is we aspire to be a global leader in responding to the climate emergency, which is brilliant. But it's like, what are your metrics behind that? So it's a really good point. We had a really good workshop on metrics before Christmas, which didn't find its way into this report, unfortunately. But it's continued to be work in progress. Ultimately, there'll be a quantitative element to these things and a qualitative sort of a less kind of numeric element to these things, and we need to factor in both. We're working really hard on the ambitions to try and be as crunchy as possible in terms of the specificity of them. We're taking a refreshed climate strategy to the March Partnership Board, which will provide some more crunch, but it's a good point, well made. You haven't missed anything. And we'll work as hard as we can to be as specific as we can, recognising that some of these things don't lend themselves as well to measurement as others.
Thank you. Debs?
Yeah, thank you. My comment was about metrics as well, actually. There's something, isn't there, about the metrics are really important, I think, for us in places, because they really show what difference this strategy is going to make to people in Calderdale. So there's just a couple of comments on metrics. One is the climate way. It is quite possible to measure our carbon emissions. So we can do a more specific target around climate, carbon emissions. And the other one is a comment that I've probably made before, so apologies, but it relates to the difference between obesity and healthy weight. And the metrics, we tend to focus on obesity as a metric, and that I think that hides. So that shows that, for example, in Calderdale, obesity is looking a bit more positive. However, healthy weight is reducing, and we've got more underweight children. So it's a plea really to, and especially in the times that we're living in, obesity is a real challenge for us, but so is underweight as well. So just a plea to use a measure of healthy weight rather than obesity, because I think that's a more accurate reflection of some of the challenges that we're facing.
Thanks very much, Debs, and I'm sure that can be picked up. So I'm not seeing anybody else, so thank you for those contributions. Ian, thank you for the presentation, and I hope people go back and reread the strategy. That gives a bit more of a context of where it is. And just to repeat Ian's view, that if people have any further comments, suggestions, thoughts about it, then please do email them in, and obviously we will share the links when it goes to the partnership board in March. Ian, any final comments you want to add?
No, just thanks so much for your comments and feedback, really helpful as ever, and yeah, you have a good rest of the day.
Thanks very much, Ian. Thank you for joining us. Okay, so I'll take us on then to item 7, which is the food strategy report. And Debs, is this yourself to introduce?
Well, I'll introduce, and then I'll hand over to my colleague Anya, and also Becky Greenwood is with us as well for this item. So just really briefly, you've had a paper that sets out a desire really for us to develop a food strategy for Calderdale. And really, I guess the key recommendation is, I think most members of the board or their organisations have already been contacted and asked for the commitment and asked to be involved. But it's a recommendation around that work reporting in to the Health and Wellbeing Board. It's such an important health issue, food. Not just sort of directly in relation to food and nutrition, but the wider influences that food can have on our communities, on our economy, and on our climate and climate change as well. So you've had the paper. I'm going to hand over. Anya can introduce herself, but she's leading this work with my team, myself and my team, from the Calderdale Food Network, which I'm really excited about. It's great to have a food network, a partnership, sort of working with us and leading on this. Over to you, Anya.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to join you today. Most of you, well, probably half of you or some of you will know anyway that my name is Anya Douglas, and I am chair and coordinator for Calderdale Food Network. And a brief summary of what that is: it's a partnership, a cross-sector partnership of organisations, individuals, community groups who have an interest in food within our community, within our region. And in developing a more sustainable, equitable food system for Calderdale. We've been in existence since 2018, when we became members of Sustainable Food Places, who are a national umbrella organisation made up of the Soil Association, Feeding Britain and Food Matters. And underneath that, I work with colleagues across the country on sort of 6 key issues, which together form the basis of a healthy, sustainable food system. Which is, it's identified sort of across the country as a national framework, but very much within that is room for us all to have our individual emphasis, which reflect the needs of our communities. We won the Bronze Award, or achieved the Bronze Award last year for our work in that developing a sustainable food system. We have a fantastic infrastructure here already in Calderdale, and as we know, particularly voluntary and community groups on the ground have pushed the agenda around food, its benefits to health and its community for a considerable period of time. We've gained a lot of traction from that. And I think what we've seen, and it's great to have Deb's support and all of your support, is that in order to take this to the next level, we need to have a strategy in place that's very, very clear about our focus, how we're going to implement it, and that has the right partners and stakeholders working, taking ownership and bringing it forward. And as Deb's pointed out, I mean, it sort of affects every sort of area of what we do here. Our focus very, very much is around the 4 key stages, and we're looking within that of having equitable access to healthy and sustainable food for families, both at home, but also in settings. So procurement is a key issue, and what we are giving our people right from sort of early years settings through to older age settings is very, very important. If we're not looking at that ourselves, and good food is always considered an add-on rather than necessity, and we're going to constantly struggle. So hence the reason for the food strategy. We commenced work on this. We have been working for a period of time anyway on developing a lot of the issues within a food strategy, and we started to bring the work on the strategy itself together around September time, with some invitations to bring stakeholders on board. Our timeline is hopefully to have a draft strategy available for comment and for development around September of 2023, and looking to produce a strategy that will be implemented from between April and June 2024. And I think, reflecting what Deborah said, our ask from you very much is your involvement, and to look at how we might structure this, who should be involved, to support it and to work with us to develop a plan to take it forward. So I'll sort of take questions or hear comments, or Debs, if you want to pick up on anything I might have missed there, that's fine too.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I've got Adam indicating, so I'll go to him first.
Thank you. It's Councillor Wilkinson. I'm the Cabinet Member for Children and Young People's Services on the Council. Firstly, just wanted to say how important this is, particularly given the cost of living crisis that we're currently going through, and the fact that there's increasing numbers of children and young people coming into schools, not necessarily being fed as they should, and sort of acknowledging the role that schools can play in making sure that, children and young people are receiving the food that they need. And I also just wanted to just acknowledge the work that the CYP Scrutiny Committee did on this, on sort of food in schools last year, and thank them for that work, and just make a note to myself and other Cabinet members that I don't think we've actually formally responded to that work as Cabinet yet. So that's something that we need to look to do in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you. Sorry, yeah, I just want to say, fully agree. And, school is a key setting as well. And very, very much, we're working closely sort of with the Anti-Poverty Network and the Food Poverty Forum, and looking at how all of our sort of in-place institutions and settings, and school would be key, can help us to take this forward. The Healthy Holidays activity programme is something we're also involved in, and it's important that we're looking to the longer term, as we know there's a kind of a lifespan on funding for a lot of these things, and there's limited capacity within schools. And part of the aim of the strategy is to be able to build capacity and to start to look forward at sort of more intervention and preventative methods. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go to Julie next, and then Josh.
Yeah, it was just to follow on from Councillor Wilkinson, that it did come to Cabinet, and Cabinet did agree the 4 recommendations, and there is somebody in Deb's team who's taking that forward. So we will make sure it's taken into account, but it has been responded to.
Thank you, Josh.
Yeah, Councillor Fenton Gunn, or Josh, Cabinet Member for Adult Services and Wellbeing. So it's really good work and a really important issue. One thing that I sometimes worry about with food is that we are very good at recognising that children have a right to and a need for healthy food, but actually not necessarily adults. And that, obviously there's quite a lot of research that shows that particularly women will go without food in order to make sure that their children have food. So kind of, I'm curious as to what we're doing to kind of guard against that. Interestingly, Hebden Bridge Group Practice in my ward are doing brilliant work with Calder Food Support, who offer food parcels, and they are working on Wednesdays, both with the midwifery service and just more generally to hand out food from the health centre, actually putting food at the centre of health is really helpful. And obviously, health centres also operating as a warm space, so it's bringing people in. So it's great to see initiatives like that. I'd be interested if there's anything we can do to formalise that a bit more, but also, you know, I recognise Adam's point about schools, and it's really important. I guess I wouldn't be a member for adult services, but don't say I do really worry that sometimes we funnel down that particular side at the expense. We just need to make sure that we are continuing to do that whilst also recognising the importance of other areas, and particularly women's nutrition. Actually, yeah.
I'll respond briefly.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not good at this. I'll respond briefly.
No, that's fine.
The strategy is very much about, and thank you, I take that on board. The strategy is very much about looking sort of across the board. That's the point of the strategy, so that we're not focusing all efforts into quick response or reactive responses. So at the moment, yes, we have a huge emphasis on food parcels and briefly, hopefully, people depending on those. What we're looking at in the longer term is how we can create more capacity, more resilience. And yes, Josh, I take Councillor Fenton, I take that on board, that it's really important that we're looking at skills, that we're looking at education for adults. And at the moment, that's essential. Unless we can develop the skills, knowledge and access to good food locally, that problem will exist. So that's a really, really key part of it. It's looking at preventative, and that's where strategy comes in, as opposed to constantly reacting to problems as we see them. So that's really, really useful. And I'd love to take that further with you as we develop that, please. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anya. Ashley.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, really good to hear all this stuff going on. And one of my other hats I wear is Chair of CYP Scrutiny. So I was involved in that report, and it's good to hear from Julie that things are progressing on that front, because it's a very important area. Just thinking of putting my ward hat back on, I think it's really important that we do things at ward level, at the level as well as overall. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that, and in particular, what could we or should we be doing as ward councillors in order to assist this process? And also, I guess, a plea to keep us as ward councillors, not just those who happen to be lucky enough to be on this board, in the loop on this subject, I think is really important. As individual councillors, we're aware of the issues, obviously, but it's the opportunity to do something which I think is important as well. So if there is anything we could or should be doing, please let us know. Thank you.
Thanks. Deb, no, she put your hand up. Do you want to come back on that one?
Just think that's a really, really helpful point, Councillor Evans, actually, and it's really useful to think about the borough-wide level and the ward level, and it just made me reflect on perhaps some opportunities to do that. So, for example, as part of the work that we're doing on the climate action plan, because obviously, as you know, food, sustainable food is really important part of our climate action plan as well. One of the things one of the elements of that plan is looking at community climate action plans and recognising that at a neighbourhood level or a ward level, there'll be different things that need to happen or the different priorities for communities around climate action. And it just made me think that food potentially could be one of those areas that we look at as those local climate action plans. And then also on the more reactive element of this and the shorter term element, I guess the work that Sarah Richardson is supporting for ward level sort of action groups, if you like, to respond to the cost of living crisis is a potential opportunity. And then finally, it made me think about the work that we're doing in Central and North Halifax around the Shared Prosperity Fund, and actually really exploring the role of food and sustainable food system in that work as well. So, Councillor Evans, we will take that up and take that forward as we develop the strategy.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to indicate. I'm taking it from the contributions there's broad support to the approach that's set out in the paper, and the role of the Health and Wellbeing Board in taking a continued overview of this. So thank you, Anya, for your time and presentation. Debs, thank you all the team involved for the work on this. Okay, if that's okay, I'll move us on then again to item 8, starting well in Calderdale. And Debs, again, I think this is starting with you.
Yes, it is. If, as you recall, Chair, each of these meetings we do take one of the 4 priorities in the wellbeing strategy and work on, give a bit of an overview of the work that's happened in that on that. And today it's a time for the starting well priority outcome. So that's about narrowing the gap in children being ready for school. Unfortunately, my colleague Rachel Smith, who's absolutely the driving force and the engine room for this work, she's unwell today, I'm afraid. But we have got we've got Adam who's working with us, our family hubs. We've obviously got Julie with us who along with myself is sort of supporting this work. But I'm going to have a go. I'm afraid it won't be as good as what Rachel would have done, but I'm going to have a go at sort of, just if it's okay, sharing my screen and taking you through the presentation that Rachel had prepared to go through the work that's been happening around starting well. But I'm conscious that other colleagues will be able to chip in and help me, because as I say, it won't be as good as if Rachel had done it. So I'm just going to try and share my screen now and try and find the presentation. Right, that is not finding that. Sorry, I must have too many windows open. Just a sec. So we have shared a presentation with you as part of the papers. There's just one change actually to the presentation that's there. I'll try again, and if I can't do it, I will, with my inability to use Teams, I will, there it is, I found it now. So if I make that, can you all see that now? I'm just trying to make it a, can you see that?
Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. So this is looking at that starting well priority for our wellbeing strategy. And as I've already said, this is about all children being ready for school, and really measured by narrowing the gap between different groups of children in school readiness, and a reminder of those ways of working, so that we're using as a health and wellbeing board. And we're really the work that the Starting Well partnership has been doing is really tried to use those ways of working. And this is a timeline that Rachel's put together, because the Starting Well partnership is actually the partnership that already existed prior to us developing the new wellbeing strategy. And this timeline tells you what some of the key things that the Starting Well partnership have been doing. So in February 2020, there was a local government association review of early years speech, language and communication, which really highlighted the need for us to bring key partners together, set up a partnership, and develop a strategy really for early maternity and early years, so that we've got a real sense of the direction and the things that we want to achieve. So we met, the inaugural meeting of the Starting Well board happened in September 2020, and at that time it was co-chaired, wasn't it, Julie, by yourself and you and I, we also did some work in March 2021 with the Early Intervention Foundation, maternity and early years maturity matrix, which is basically a set of standards really around what a place should have, what should be in place for a really strong starting well strategic approach to early years, maternity and early years. So through that work, we published a family journey, which really sets out in a really, I think, accessible and user-friendly way, right from preconception through to a child starting schools, both both what services and what support's available, but also what families can do themselves to maximise the likelihood that the child will have brilliant outcomes, be ready for school and go on to have really good outcomes, and really reflects what Julie just said earlier in the item on the health and care partnership, the West Yorkshire Health and Care Partnership strategy, really setting out what families can do themselves as well as what services can do. In December 2021, we refreshed our wellbeing strategy and really made narrowing the gap in children being ready for school one of our 4 priority outcomes. In January, we had a very helpful review of maternity, infant and early years speech, language and communications pathways that reported to the Starting Well board, and that really highlighted that some of the challenges in the pathway for speech, language and communication were potentially contributing to that gap in children being ready for school. So that's a real area of focus for the work that the partnership's been doing since then. We also in March published a Starting Well strengths and needs analysis, and that really went out and spoke to a really wide range of partners and stakeholders, including families and parents, and also people that work with pregnant, new and expectant families. That's really been helpful in setting out developing our early years strategy. So it talks about what's good, what our strengths are, what our assets are, but also what some of the key needs are in Calderdale. In June, we had the announcement from of the Family Hubs programme and the Start for Life programme, and we were one of 75 councils and partnerships invited to submit an expression of interest, and we did that, and Adam is our programme manager and is with us on the call. We submitted a bid in October, and we have also drafted in November, I suppose all along this process we've been doing work with partners to develop a Starting Well strategy, and we really see Family Hubs as a delivery vehicle for that strategy, and I'll come on to Family Hubs later. We got confirmation of the Family Hubs funding just before Christmas, and this you've had we didn't publish because we've only got a draft strategy at the moment, but you have members of the board have had sight of the draft strategy, but this infographic aims to summarise the strategy on a page, and what you can see there is the child at the centre, and that recognising that the influences on a child being ready, really clear that the outcome that we want to achieve is children being ready for school, and that gap in school readiness being narrowed. But what we can see is those influences on children being ready for school. So housing, the environment and community, the family and home environment, and early years services, early years providers of childcare and schools as being the key influences and mechanisms by which we can support all children be ready for school. And I think what's really important in this strategy is recognising that for most families, the support that they get to enable the child to be ready for school, the child to develop, actually doesn't come from formal services. It comes from other family members, grandparents, parent and toddler groups, the local community. And that's an incredibly important part of our system of children being ready for school. And that there are some families and some children that do need some service support as well. Perhaps they may be at a higher risk of not being ready for school, and therefore need some service support. So again, that's really reflected in the work that we've done to develop the strategy. And we've got these 4 objectives objectives that we've developed as a partnership based on what we heard from families and partners in the strengths and needs assessment, and also based on the standards and our self-assessment around the Early Intervention Foundation maturity matrix. So the first objective is that all families have the support and information they need to enable them to support their child's development. That doesn't necessarily mean it's support from services, but it might be support from community or from other family members. The second objective is that families at the highest risk of poor outcomes, including children not being ready for school, get early support and are actively involved in the support they receive, and that is more likely to be support from services. The third outcome is that, have I given? Yeah, so that I think I've got the wrong diagram here. Apologies, but the third, the actual third, because that's just repeating the second one. I'll come back to number 3. Apologies. This is the wrong version of the diagram. The fourth objective is that those wider influences on children's development, so that all families have safe, accessible play areas, activities, environments, and opportunities to meet and socialise with other families. I'm just going to, I'll come back to, I can't remember off the top of my head the exact wording of objective 3, so I'll come back to that in a second. And then I'm going to hand over now to Adam, just to talk us through just a couple of slides about family hubs, if that's okay, Adam, and tell me when you want me to move the slide over.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. So good morning. As Deb said, I'm Adam Heintoff. I'm the Family Hub Programme Manager for Calderdale, and I'm new to role, started in Calderdale in December. So delighted to be here, and thank you for the invite. So I'm just going to quickly go through the Family Hub approach in Calderdale that Debs has alluded to already. So family hubs use a whole family approach to provide a single access point to family support services. And they build on the existing children's centre model, but also aim to offer support for families with children of all ages up to age 25 with special educational needs and disabilities. So the aim is that services are integrated across health, social care, as well as the voluntary and community organisations and our education settings as well. It aims to be a place-based approach of joining up locally in the planning and delivery of family services. And we can see there from evidence before that we've already started this work through our self-assessment with the EIF. The 3 main principles of family hubs are access, connection, and relationships. So that means that we aim to improve access to information and services for families. We want to improve the connections between families, professionals, services, and providers, and also aim to make sure that we're putting relationships at the heart of the family support that we offer. So as you know, Calderdale received confirmation in December that it had been successful in its expression of interest. Now, the programme includes funding to transform the ways services are designed and delivered, as well as ensuring that there is a comprehensive, universal and targeted offer for families. And this could be through a physical hub, as well as online via a digital offer. And a multi-agency delivery plan has been worked up and submitted to government for assessment, and we expect feedback at some point in January on that delivery plan. So working with the involvement of families is key to the success of the programme. So lots of work will be done in consultation to make sure the offer is right for families and the communities. And this is a true partnership approach and will require stakeholder buy-in from a wide range of different organisations. So if you just move on to the next one, please, Deb. Thank you. So a family hub offer can be delivered in different ways. So firstly, a family hub building can deliver a wide range of different services with different professionals where a family or young person could access. And this could be using existing sites across Calderdale, such as children's centres or youth hub, youth provisions. Services could be accessed through a family hub, but elsewhere in the community. So this could be in outreach, such as clinical settings, libraries, or community buildings. All services or information and advice can be accessed digitally, either through a static information page or something more interactive, such as a parenting programme that families can access in their own time, when's convenient. So it's a really exciting time for Calderdale as we look to transform the way that we all work together to benefit our families and communities. And I look forward on working on this programme, which is due to end in March 2025.
Thanks, Adam. And I'm going to stop sharing now and find the, I'm so sorry, this is where it would have been, this is where Rachel would have done much better than me. That third objective of the, I'm just scrolling through to find the third objective, which I can't remember the wording of, but I'll just quickly find that. Yeah, so it's the 4 objectives are: all families have the support and information they need to enable them to support the child's development. Families at the highest risk of poor outcomes, including children not being ready for school, get support and are actively involved in the care and support they receive. New and expectant families have the support they need for healthy preconception, a healthy pregnancy, healthy families, and a healthy child in the first year. And then finally, all families have safe, accessible play areas, activities, environments, and opportunities to meet with and socialise with other families. So apologies for that. So really interested and keen to hear, I guess, invite Julie and Julie in as well for any comments from Julie, who's obviously a key, in leadership of this agenda, and then questions and comments from the board members.
I'm happy to come in after Councillor Wilkinson, Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks, Deb. Just before I bring Adam in, I mean, perhaps I can just make a couple of observations. I don't want to go heavily political, but I'm still struggling in a sense to identify how the Family Hubs programme differs from children's centres, and I do feel a massive reinventing of the wheel. However, it's a good opportunity to get additional resource in. I'm assuming that the 3 million is over the lifetime of the programme, and again, it's perhaps just helpful to put that into context. The current budget for children's centres is, I think, 4 to 4.5 million, and that is less than and that's reduced from what it was. So again, it's an important resource, and it's good that we've got it. But just being aware of how the scale compares, I think, is important context as well. Just more widely in terms of the presentation, because it's perhaps a useful one to pick up for future things as well. I did think that having the timeline of the work that's gone on was really, really helpful and really valuable, because obviously when we have a report like this to this board, some members will be very familiar with the work that's going on, but for others it's not their day-to-day job. So I think that bit of context all the time when we get these update reports, that just sets the scene. And of course what struck is we've launched this really important work and this focus on readiness for school, but also at the most difficult possible time, really, with the impact of COVID, which we couldn't have there. And I might want to pick up a bit more about that and the implications for schools in due course. So Adam, I'll come to you first and then Julie.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, I mean, first of all, I just want to stress just how important this work is. All the research out there shows that sort of how children do in the first 3 or so years of their life will determine sort of their outcomes for the rest of their lives. So, in some ways, sort of early years is like the ultimate invest to save. And I don't just mean in sort of monetary terms, I mean investing in terms of, our strategically and in terms of our priorities as well. And when I started as a cabinet member, it was about 6 months before we had the sort of early years peer review. So I've sort of seen the journey right from the start, and it was really clear very, very early on from the whole start of that timeline that everyone that was involved had a real ambition to do better for our children at early years. Because we know that if we get that right, it will impact how they do the rest of their lives, and also put less pressure on other services. So, children and families will not need the high level support and the intensive support that, is so costly to the council, but obviously to society and to the families as well, if we get this right. And it also means that they'll go on to flourish when it comes to adulthood as well, and probably not need quite as many services and support then as well. It's good, as Tim says, good to see that timeline and how much work has gone on since the start and since that early years review. I felt work had stalled a little bit during COVID, which would have been completely understandable given the pressures on the public health team. But actually, when you see that timeline, you can see there's actually quite a lot going on behind the scenes, even at that time. And then just coming on to family hubs, I think it's excellent that we were successful in our bid, and that'll help us to provide even more support and more connected services. As Tim says, that it's non-recurrent funding, it's £3 million. So it's really important that transformational work has legacy sort of beyond the period of time that we've actually spent the money. And I know there was a bit of anxiety about what it would mean for our children's centres, the family hubs money. But I think coming back to what Tim says, I think it's important to acknowledge this is about sort of enhancing what we're already doing rather than replacing the children's centres. And I think it's really important to acknowledge the important work that they and other providers and partners do for our early years children and families. So I just finished by just commending the work that's been done by Rachel and Adam and Debs, really, and also just saying it's really good to have Sarah as a cabinet member with a focus on this work as well. I think, having that sort of strategic and political support for it all is really important as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Julie?
Thanks very much, Julie Jenkins, Director of Children and Young People Services for the Council. Just to say about how important this work is, as Councillor Wilkinson has said, that we're overall measuring how many of our children are ready to start school, and we're not as strong on that as we could be in Calderdale. And what we know for our children is they do a lot of catching up through primary and secondary school, and when they leave secondary school, they're doing really well and better than the average. So if we can get that early years and that early education right, and that starting well right, we'll know we're going to give our children in Calderdale a huge boost. What will make the biggest change? I think it's captured in the text and the presentation. And I think it's really important that we're clear with families, but also practitioners. There are a lot of things that families can do that are low cost and no cost. And we did a lot of work, didn't we, Debs, on 50 things to do before you're 5. There's a website and there's access to that for families, and there's lots of things you can do with your kids where it doesn't need a load of money and you don't have to pay to get into Eureka. Just some really simple, lovely things to do with your kids, and I don't think we should forget that. Just in terms of the objectives, Debs, because there's a lot of mention in there around support. I think 2 or 3 of the objectives are around support, and I wonder who's this for? Is it for the parents? Is it for practitioners? Because whether you're working with a family or whether you're a family yourself, I think it'd be really good to be clear with parents around some of the simple things they can do to really promote their child's development. One of them, the biggest one, is communication. So if we encourage parents to go to libraries, to get books, to talk, to play with their children, that is going to make one of the biggest differences. The other is access to early education, whether that's a childminder, preschool, taking up your 2-year-old offer. It's all of those practicalities of what's on the ground, making sure parents are clear. And that family journey, as Councillor Wilkinson said, is really important too. I can remember when we first launched this work and we were at the Shea, and you were a very new parent then, Councillor Wilkinson, and you were saying in terms of the journey and the step-off points and what children are expected to do at different ages. So a lot of that visual stuff is absolutely brilliant. So yeah, massive support, and thank you for the work, Debs. Just a little tweaking around the objectives, I think, about some practicalities of families, what they can do and what practitioners who go into family house, whether you're a health visitor or whoever you are, or an early years worker, that you're working with parents hand in glove. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Julie. Sean?
Thank you, Councillor Swift. Sorry, I'm Sean Cook, Assistant Director for Operations in Adult Social Care and Wellbeing Services, representing Kath Cormally, who's on leave this week, Director. I was just going to say, from a hubs perspective, and we discussed this previously in an initial meeting about the hubs mid last year before the bid was successful. But this aligns beautifully with the early health and prevention agenda in adult social care services that will start to gain much more traction and tangible traction over the next year and beyond, really. And particularly how it links, you know, if we get this right, and why we shouldn't, as a group of services within the council and with partner agencies, the seamlessness from in respect of the other strategic objectives of living and working well and aging well, and how as well, you know, we're beginning now to jointly work around practical steps in terms of a single directory of services, that people know where they can go for information across public health, children's services, adult services, voluntary sector and so on, which will make accessibility to information so much easier. And will also, again, link very well in terms of our thinking around the reimagining of our day opportunities. So the moving away from day services. And as the earlier slide outlined, you know, it's more about the community and outreach and how we work as a group of communities within a bigger community across Calderdale. So it's just such a fantastic opportunity in terms of just pushing that open door around how we can kind of work more effectively as agencies and really start to hit some of these outcomes.
Thank you, Sean. Ashley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, some great work being done here. The family hubs aspect came to one of my CYP scrutiny meetings, which was very informative, and this is, you know, confirming those issues. And the activities being done. One of the things which struck me particularly in the scrutiny meeting was the importance of communication here, because of the importance of getting as many parents and families as involved in the hubs as possible. Whilst we recognise some of the points that Tim was making about, you know, is it family hubs, is it children's centres, impact, is it all extra money? You've addressed those sorts of issues, but I think it is important that we let people know how they access it and that it is there in order to gain the best results from that. So I just repeat that point which came from that meeting. I think that's important. But in reference to the starting well, excuse me, slides that you went through in terms of the key objectives, I was particularly interested in the reference to item number 4, which I think was the original one, on the original and in the later one, and the importance of families and children meeting and socialising and all those sorts of things. I think I'm going to fade out before I finish this comment. I should say very quickly that one of my hobby horses, many hobby horses, some might say, I've had in this context is the playing out concept, which was evolved and developed originally in Bristol. And I've tried over a number of years to try and kick this one off in Calderdale. And I think this is a great opportunity. If we're going to get families involved, we're going to improve social skills and all those sorts of things between young people and families, that I really do think we need to look at as part of this, the possibility of setting up playing out groups across Calderdale, and I'd be very happy to assist in that process in my own ward or in other wards as well. So a little plea for playing out, please, in this context. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashley. That's a really interesting one. Sarah?
Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me all right, everyone? I've got a new headset, a Christmas present. So as long as it can be heard. Thank you. Yeah. So I'm Sarah Courtney. I'm lead member for public health, but also towns and engagement. And I think what I want to say, so responding to that point specifically, Ashley, is I think both sort of in public health and in regeneration, and because my portfolio sort of covers the sort of is sort of a bit overarching in some of these sort of things. You know, we've got fantastic healthy green and healthy streets sort of program that we're sort of looking at and making sure that streets are being sort of not prioritized, but made inclusive for pedestrians and pedestrians and non-motorized vehicle users, as well as for car users. So I think our streets should start becoming, we're looking at them becoming safer and healthier. And I think maybe looking at play streets as well could be something that I think could be brought into that. And I know that Debs is really passionate in public health as well as in regen. We're really really passionate about getting to make sure that people can be casually more active in their daily lives. And I think being able to use streets more safely, and for them to be more attractive and to be safer, then actually it encourages people of all ages, including children, so people, the adults from those families can also be out there with their children or grandchildren, and using those streets. So I think it is something that it is definitely that sort of casual increase in activity and play outside, I think, is very much part of the agenda, is what I'm trying to say, I suppose, and it won't be forgotten. And I'm very keen for that to go forwards as well, and it is sort of being woven into some of the town's work that's going on at the moment. So yeah, it's great, and very, very pleased to see all of this sort of coming through. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Not seeing any other hands. Debs, I don't know if there's anything you want to catch in summing up. I think this is largely for an update and a debate on where we are, but I don't know if there's anything you want to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to say how helpful that conversation has been, and that feedback has been, and so we will tweak the strategy objectives as Julie suggested. Really important point made by Sean about the connection with the families, children live in families of people of all ages. Now we can integrate I think the whole point of family hubs is it's an integrated model, so that's really helpful. So we'll definitely pursue that. And then absolutely, Councillor Evans, really interested. We'll definitely be in touch about the playing out groups. And I think for me, that's such an important part of this. I think one of the challenges, I guess, with the Starting Well agenda is that, as Julie said it right at the very beginning, we've tended to take a service approach, and services are incredibly important. But actually, by taking an outcomes approach, it moves us beyond thinking about services and thinking about the environment and thinking about what happens in communities, as well as the services that are provided. And I think that'll be more sustainable in the longer term, but do completely understand how challenging all of this is at the moment. So thanks very much for everyone's comments, really useful.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. A couple of things might flag up for the next time this comes, but let's move on, because I'm aware of how much pressures everybody's under, and we're making good progress with today's agenda. So the next item, all about Calderdale, the Calderdale JSNA. I'm sorry, Debs, I think this is this you again?
You'll all be absolutely delighted to hear it isn't me. It's going to be Ken and Paula. So Ken Barnsley and Paula from the Public Health team.
Okay, over to them.
Right, morning to you all. Ken Barnsley here, acting consultant in Public Health and Deb's team, and leading on all about Calderdale. You can't see me this morning because my camera has decided that it's not going to work. But what I am going to do is share a presentation with you. There was a report and presentation circulated with the agenda, so hopefully you've had a chance to have a look through that. So I'm not going to go through it in great detail, but just some of the things that I just wanted to highlight this morning, just to facilitate a debate. Really, I think the idea of this item today is really to get some feedback from you, and that's kind of identified in the recommendation. So first of all, I'll try and share my screen. Let's see if that works. Yeah, so hopefully up on screen you have the presentation now.
Yes, got that.
Yeah, great. Okay, so what I want to tell you about this morning is about the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. As I say, the the last guidance that we had as health and wellbeing boards on joint strategic needs assessment was from 2013. Government and the department are just about to update that to bring it into line, because there's a whole lot of things that have changed since then in terms of integrated care systems and our own integrated care partnership, which went from being collaborations to statutory partnerships. So the way that joint strategic needs assessment works is very, very different now, because it's to fit into that whole new structure and that whole new landscape. So I won't go right the way through all the things that are identified in the presentation, but there are a couple of things that I think are important. Joint strategic needs assessment and all about Calderdale it's fundamentally our best understanding of the health needs and assets of our place, and it is a singular place. It's a very distinct place, although it has a lot of commonalities in terms of needs across the life course for our population. But I think one of the things that's really important is community assets, and in the original guidance it was made very, very clear that health and wellbeing boards should consider what local assets from communities can offer in terms of skills, experience, expertise and resource. So a lot of joint strategic needs assessment is about the data, and we have lots of data, but it's also important to understand that the views and concerns and issues that our local communities have are important data as well. So focus groups, one-to-one conversations with residents are very, very important data. The All About Calderdale board has given a lot of consideration to what we actually want from our joint strategic needs assessment, and that's framed in terms of what does the data say, what does the data mean, but most importantly then, what are we going to do about that? And the approach that we've taken is to kind of push that back to the 4 life course boards and ask each of our life course boards to come up with a needs assessment for their part of the life course. So for starting well, for developing well, for living and working well, and for aging well. And I'm just going to give you a couple of kind of different ways of approaching that. So the Living and Working Well board have developed an intelligence brief. So it fits in very, very closely with their main ambition, which is to improve and produce good emotional health and well-being and reduce suicide. So they wanted a high-level review of evidence, looking at what the impact of poverty, rising cost of living, not feeling safe, poor quality housing is, who's at greatest risk, and so on. So very detailed points. So our intelligence teams are starting to look at this now to support their needs, and that then will feed into the Living and Working Well strategies and plans. Another aspect of this then is looking at sustainable ways to engage and involve people, and this has come directly from the Aging Well board, looking at sustainable ways to engage and involve older people and communities in all of their work. And they came up with a kind of a 4-pronged approach, which was to make sure that we're providing feedback on needs to our residents and communities, that we're developing a dialogue, that we're making sure that our practitioners are trained effectively in engaging with residents and developing that capacity, and that we're learning from all the things that we do. And also trying to make sure that we're working across the layers. So very important in terms of joint strategic needs assessment, all about Calderdale, is that we are engaging and involving our local residents and communities in all the work that we do, and in what is actually quite a hierarchical system, to try and make sure that there are opportunities at various different layers within that system for people to influence the things that we do. Okay. And just recently then, there's some provisional new guidance been produced for health and wellbeing boards on joint strategic needs assessment, so that'll influence our all about Calderdale. And it's saying very, very clearly that it should involve local community representative organisations, consider the wider social, environmental environmental and economic factors that impact on health and well-being across all demographics. So the intention is for it to be very, very inclusive, but also the original guidance, and I'm guessing the new guidance will be no different, is the emphasis is on what's important to us locally. We want the joint strategic needs assessment that meets our needs and provides us with information, analysis, and a narrative that helps us to improve our strategies and plans and deliver and improve services that improve health and reduce health inequalities. So just a final thing then that I wanted to say before I pass back to Debs and Paula to see if they have any additional comments that they want to make, is we've also recognised that, data and intelligence is absolutely fundamental to the work that we do. And between all the partner organisations, and within that there's all the health and social care economy, we've got police involved, we've got fire and rescue involved, we've got our community and voluntary sector involved, and then we've got our residents. In all of that data and intelligence, we've got a lot of collaboration already, and we're utilising that data and intelligence for a whole range of different things, from joint strategic needs assessment to influence our health and wellbeing strategy across the life course, our population health management approach, and all the rest of our planning for the council, health and social care services, our providers, and also for the integrated care partnership. So in October, we had a workshop at the Shea to look at all of that and how we might better bring all that together to meet our needs. And just the final thing that I'd focus on, and I'll put this full screen if I can, is we looked at what were the ingredients then to improve the way that we use data, knowledge and intelligence to support our planning and our understanding of the needs of our communities. And we looked at the ingredients, and we looked at some of the key changes that we'd have to make to get an excellent system. And that's what we really want within the context of West Yorkshire and all the work that's going on across the region as well. So each of the life course boards, each of the life course areas identified some of the key things. And this is kind of a model and a set of principles now for developing our data and intelligence strategy. And we've begun work with our partners on doing that now. So between population health management, between the ICP and between the joint strategic needs assessment, to make sure that our data is flexible, integrated and shared so that we can use it to better understand our needs and therefore improve the way that we develop our strategies and plans. So we're looking for intelligent platforms that are accessible to partners and families. And I think that aim itself has a key element in it, making sure it's accessible for our residents, to partners and families. Make sure that we're clear about the purpose of those different systems. We want data and intelligence to drive improvements in outcomes. And we want to change the culture so that practitioners and families have an appetite to use intelligence. So we want to improve literacy and data literacy so that people are able to use data to inform their own choices and the way that they contribute to the system. So these are some of the kind of the key principles that we're then going to develop and embed into our data and intelligence plan, which will support all of our Calderdale. So at the moment, the 4 life course boards are moving on with developing their needs assessments and all about Calderdale for each part of the life course. And we'll report that back into Health and Wellbeing Board as time goes on. So what I'll do now is I'll hand back to Debs initially through you, Chair, and to Paula to see if they have any additional comments to make.
Thank you. Do we want to stop sharing the screen or?
I'll try and do that, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Has that done it? Stop share. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Debs, anything you want to?
Yeah, I mean, just to I guess sort of I suppose summarise. I guess we've been working since over the last sort of couple of years on the JSNA, and really coming from a point of the JSNA is not an end in itself. It's a means to us making really good decisions. It's a means to an end. And we've been working with a steering group, a fantastic steering group. And there's a few things we've put in place through that. One is we've got an analyst network now from right across the system. So previously, the JSNA was Paula, who's on the call, and a couple of colleagues from my team, whereas now we've got a much wider analyst network of people sort of creating and producing intelligence. I think the second thing is that we were really clear that it's really important that the JSNA is designed by users of intelligence as well as producers of intelligence, if it's going to really help us with the so what and using data and intelligence to make a difference. We decided, and Ken sort of said this, but it might be worth just reiterating, in doing this new approach to our JSNA, which is called all about Calderdale, we decided to start with those 4 priority outcomes, that we've identified. So be really clear that we want to know what do we need to know in order to develop the right plans to achieve those priority outcomes, and then finally, as Ken said, what we've done really helpfully is bring together the work we're doing on All About Calderdale with the work we're doing on population health management and on data sharing, and that's led us to a place where it becomes clear, I think, that we probably need some sort of very high level sense of direction around intelligence and how we use intelligence, which is beyond All About Calderdale, but which All About Calderdale will be one of the delivery vehicles for. I hope that makes sense and sort of draws it together a little bit.
Thanks very much, Debs. For it's important people are aware of the work that's going on here. The JSNA is one of the key responsibilities of the Health and Wellbeing Board, but it's also very much part of the sort of hidden wiring of the system underneath. So thank you for that. Are there any questions or comments for Ken or Debs on this at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody, so I am aware we're losing people to other meetings. I appreciate the precious people are under, so I think if people are okay, we'll move on to the final items, if that's okay. So item 10, which is the health and care priorities update, that's an oral report from Robin, I think.
Sorry, Chair, just going to go off mute. Yeah, I think it was just an update on system pressures. I think you probably understand them all well. We're seeing the impact of that very publicly. I think the only thing I really wanted to say was that there's been a lot of work around trying to ensure we get the messages out clearly about the using the services we have effectively. So I would just ask that we all kind of both amplify those messages and ensure that we use the right routes in. So I think the important thing to say is that there is not one part of the system that's under more pressure than any other at this point. So effectively, we have an assessment of each part of the system through the NHS. All parts of the system are under equal levels of pressure. So that includes primary care, secondary care, tertiary care, and social care. And I think it's really key to sort of emphasise that there are some strong routes and advice about how we can use those services effectively and well. We, as you know, are experiencing the kind of combined risks that we anticipated before Christmas around, what's been called a twindemic. So at this particular moment, it's always the busiest time in the year in the context of an ongoing level of ongoing system pressure leading up to Christmas. So what we are seeing is both the impact of the flu, the impact of COVID, the impact of delayed care, and also usual bugs and impacts on the winter coming just after Christmas. So I would just ask if we can sort of collectively support those messages, urge people to use the system wisely. There is finite capacity. There is industrial action planned in the next couple of weeks, which is going to have a further impact on the system. And just if people, but also that the services are still there and that the NHS and social care are still working really hard and the services still are functioning. So I think that's probably all I want to say, apart from that we are looking to do some work through various mechanisms. There's a gold silver mechanism to try to capture some of the data about the kind of challenges that we're facing, because it's not just the sheer volume of need for support the public is coming to health and care for, but the word is being used as acuity. So it's the degree of illness, effectively. It's the degree of frailty and illness and impact that people have, which is meaning that the ability to discharge into community, the ability to triage at the entry point into health and social care is harder. And the ability for some of our health and care settings to manage this risk is more difficult. So, and we had a meeting yesterday, and Sean was kind of sharing some of the challenges around people in discharge to assess beds. So you'll know that there's been funding made available to support people to enhance assessment, enhance effectively intermediate kind of care solutions. It's proving harder and harder to move people on from that provision. That is supposed to be a very short-term temporary intervention. So I think we are going to face this issue for a while. We are less likely to see it as a short-term blip, and I don't think we yet know how long the impact's going to be. I think the thing I'd also say is that there are mechanisms out there in terms of both use of pharmacy, in both how people access primary care and how people seek advice outside of maybe established patterns. And I think we're going to need to sort of have a serious conversation about that. So yeah, I think I'll leave it there, Chair. And just others may want to add to it, but I don't think I need to say anything more. It's all very public. It's all very challenging. We are looking to mitigate harm and risk, but we are only working in the context of a finite service and a finite resource. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. Yes, so I might have a couple of questions. Let's just check if, does anybody else want to come in with anything to add on the pressures at this point? Unfortunately, Anna had to leave just before. I suspect she might have commented otherwise. Yeah, okay.
Sorry, Chair, in terms of just the hospital, I think it's important that I think what Anna might say is that A&E is incredibly challenged. The ability to hand over from the Yorkshire Ambulance Service is challenged. I think I would say that relatively speaking, and it is relatively speaking, I'd emphasise that, handover times, access to care, and the word, I don't like the word actually, but I'll use it because it's the flow through the system, because we're talking about human beings here that need health and care, but the flow through the system in our area is relatively good compared to the wider national picture, regional picture. The access to some of the most critical need, and I'm talking about access to cancer services, stroke and heart disease, is strong and still performing in the context of national targets at some of the best performance in the region and nationally. So I would just reassure people that people are being triaged, are being prioritised. The most critical care, the most life-threatening emergency conditions are being responded to. But I'd urge people to operate and think in that context and recognise that the strain of the system is severe.
Thanks, Robin. I mean, that was just more or less answered one of the points I was just going to ask or hint at. That, yeah, for example, the figures I've seen on ambulance delays and so on says whilst they're they're above what we would normally think of as being as acceptable. They are not quite as bad as some of the horror story figures we've seen from other parts of the country most of the time. Fingers crossed. I think you've partly touched on the other thing I was going to sort of highlight and ask, which is kind of what we're able to do in terms of modelling of what is likely to happen going forward. And I think you've hinted that that's very difficult to answer, but these pressures in the system are not going to clear quickly. You know, the levels of demand are like to stay high, and if we are seeing, for example, issues with moving people on from discharge to assessed beds, then that adds to the challenge for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, one of the discussions we've been having this week, Chair, is that that there's a challenge for providers in the complexity of need and the complexity of services that may be required. That in a commissioning context of developing the kind of health and care we need, we are going to need to think about that longer term and whether that's sufficient. We are looking at clearly making additional, whether it's bed capacity, resource capacity available. Fundamentally, I wouldn't want this to be misinterpreted, but I don't think that the main core issue is not about immediate money being able to solve this. The challenge is workforce and skilled workforce, and that's true of social care and health. So I know I've seen some discussion about Nightingales for social care, or extra beds or extra areas. Property, facilities, spaces for that kind of provision would not be the issue. It would be that you'd be basically moving staffing from one part of the system to another, and not necessarily reducing risk of harm or improving outcomes for people seeking to use the system. This is the challenge, and you'll know that isn't something that we can resolve overnight. I mean, Penny's on the call and may want to add to this, but we are very focused on quality, safety and harm mitigation all of the time. But it would be wrong to suggest that harm can be fully mitigated in the context of the operating environment we're in. And it is about harm mitigation and harm minimization. You will not be able to prevent, if people are staying in discharge to assess beds way beyond the time they should, they will be deconditioned. That's again what the jargon. What I mean is people are potentially less independently able to be in the care that they should be in when they were admitted into hospital, because their ability to be independent, their ability to look after themselves or support themselves will have reduced because of the impact. And that is clearly why we want to get people into the right care as fast as possible. But it is very, very challenging.
Thank you. Penny, do you want to take up that invitation and add anything?
I will do, and apologies if I sound a bit croaky, because I am one of those people with some bugs, and that's the reason the camera's been off for a bit of today. I didn't think members of the public needed to see my my cold face. So probably just to echo a couple of Robin's comments, really, in terms of, it is pressurised, the system at this point in time. Colleagues are prioritising those people that require the most immediate care and services, and I think the public messaging that we've been putting out over recent days is really thinking about how can you support yourself to stay well at this point in time, and to choose well in terms of those services that are available. So nothing new in terms of those Together We Can Choose Well offers, but re-emphasising and support. We've talked about the vaccination programmes taking up both COVID and flu opportunities. What I would say is that, staff are working incredibly hard on the front line here, and our ability to support them and for the public to be kind to them at the times of pressure is really, really key. And I think, Councillor Swift, I think that's where you started this conversation in terms of Health and Wellbeing Board today. So I think our doubling and redoubling our efforts in terms of being kind to colleagues is really important. I think the final point I'd make is that this does happen at this time of year. It does feel that harder at this moment in time, I think we shouldn't be deterred in terms of looking at, well, what does the future operating model need to look like? And it links back, I think, to some of the aging well conversation we've had. What's our data telling us in relation to the health needs of our population, and really using the data and intelligence to drive what commissioning service delivery models do we need for the future, and work with our population in terms of that. So I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it there. I just urge everybody, just in terms of seeking, choose well in terms of services, and be kind to the frontline colleagues.
We're very sorry, Charles, because that was my. Honestly, that's amazing. I was then just going to say after Payne spoke that I think if there are 4 words I would choose to leave you with today, it's be kind and choose well. Be kind, be kind and choose well. People are making career decisions in the current operating environment about whether or not they can sustain this, and you'll only have to look at social media to see that actually playing out. So we are all relying on people who are working very hard and under a lot of pressure, and we know that it can be very frustrating in terms of how difficult it may be to get the services in the timescales or the response that you would hope for. But it's crucial. This is a defining moment, I think. And meanwhile, our other responsibility is to develop some hope and some future potential for what the system will look like in the future. That's going to be a better future than maybe it may feel like right now.
Thanks, Robin, and yeah, certainly completely echo that. I just wonder on the choose well one, if there's anything more we can feed back, and I think West Yorkshire is placed where the resources list to this. I think what they've done with the children's information site, and I can't remember the name of it, I apologise, which simply goes beyond don't go to A&E, but tries to set out with particular conditions what the sort of triggers and concerns are. I think the more we can do something like that, if you think about something like flu, for example, I completely get the message that, for most people, if you've got flu, actually you don't, frankly, there's not much point in going to the GP, never mind turning up at A&E, because it's simply a case of getting through it. But on the other hand, there are people where there are complications, and it's helping people understand what the key triggers and warning signs are as well. I think where sometimes, I speak myself as a layperson, you struggle to know sometimes what the things are, and that's an area perhaps where there may be other things the partnership can do to support us with information on that. I'm sure some of that is already being thought about. Can I bring in a couple more people? I've got Josh and then Julie.
Yeah, it's on the choosing well point, really. The other day I went to buy coffee for all the people standing on the ambulance picket line, and when they found out who I was, I got the expected earful. And it was interesting because one of the things that they raised was that while they're quite forgiving of the public not always choosing well and recognising the severity, they said that consistently they do seem to have problems with other services not recognising what severity triggers should trigger an ambulance call out or an A&E visit. And the ones that they raised with me specifically were, they mentioned care homes, and I've asked them to give me some details of where that's happened in Calderdale, because actually without actual examples, it's not as easy for us to do stuff. So I've asked for that active example, and I'm chased them up a couple of times so I can get that, so I can follow that up with my directorate. But also GPs was the big one, and this that people are being sent very quickly to A&E and escalated very quickly. And I just wonder if there's something within the system that we can do to make sure that, I'm pretty sure that anyone in healthcare is cognizant of the issues going on in emergency services, but just that, are people using the appropriate referrals, and what can we do to improve the level of referrals when we're making sure people are going to the right place? I know that Councillor Wilkinson had a particularly tricky time in A&E, so I think just making sure that we take that pressure off those key pinch points.
Yeah. Robin, I think we're aware of something said. You just want to come back on that point, perhaps?
Well, yeah, So we almost spend our lives in health and care dealing with these issues, and I'm afraid you probably would find, and this is just a human thing, I just got to say, every part of the health and care system would say that the other parts of the health and care system don't necessarily refer well. And so you would talk to a group of GP colleagues, and there'd be some frustration about the way that the people maybe aren't choosing well, but also how other parts of the system, including the secondary care, are maybe not referring effectively in. So I think some of that's human, some of it's under the fact that people are under extreme pressure. But we do and are working particularly with people, social care providers. I think there's been a huge increase in awareness and understanding through the pandemic, actually. And I think that's a positive. I think I'm sure my view on this, but I think the negative is that the people there's a legacy, a psychological legacy of that experience, I think, around risk and the impact on that in social care settings. So I think it's a positive and negative. I think other parts of the system everyone's under such pressure that it's just a human reaction, but we do keep doing that, and we have those conversations all of the time. So just to reassure you, that's a very core part of what we do.
Thanks, Robin. Julie?
Hi, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to give some reassurance on some of the messaging that we have been sending out in terms of booklets that have gone out to every household. That's not from VAC, that was from our colleagues within the council. The winter messaging packs, the winter care packs that all went out before Christmas to 2,500 of our vulnerable and elderly people via the groups. So it was just a point to make, and the winter messaging will continue. So I just want to make people aware around the table that is the case.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Yeah, thanks, Julie. Just say also, we did a lot of work around supporting people on advice on cost of living and financial support. And let's remember that these things are all connected. That people's ability to get support around affordable warmth, to keep warm, to eat well, to look after themselves is all about that strategy of reducing demand in the health care system, as well as people living better lives. So that is a really good single point reference, hopefully.
Thanks, Robin. Brenda, Councillor Monteith.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to kind of reiterate what's being said, I think Calderdale is doing much better than many other parts of the country, where we're hearing terrible stories of people waiting for ages and ages in A&E, and even waiting outside hospitals in ambulances. That doesn't seem to be so much an issue in Calderdale, as far as I'm aware. And just anecdotally, a number of friends and colleagues who've had to tap into various sort of parts of the NHS system and the hospital system and GPs, I'm hearing that people are getting the attention that they need when they need it in a timely fashion. And I think that is a credit to everybody who is working in the service, who are really working their socks off to try to keep this creaking edifice somehow or other working. So that, you know, that's my experience of it, that people are saying, yes, it's, you know, there's awful things happening, but my experience has been good. So that's a very positive note. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Adam?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I think those messages that Robin says about choose well and sort of be kind, absolutely correct. But I think there also needs to be an acknowledgement that particularly at weekends, a lot of those choices that we're asking people to think about are just not available. So if you want a GP appointment, you're not going to be able to see GP on the weekend. Most pharmacies are closed. We don't have the walk-in centres in Calderdale that we once had. And if you ring 111, it's often taking an hour and a half even to get through. And then people are getting a message to say they're not going to get a call back. So, you know, we have to, whilst we're asking people to choose well, I think it's also important to understand that there's a higher level of anxiety amongst a lot of people about things at the moment with public health messages that are going about. And if they can't get that help from any other source, that's when people end up in A&E. And I think, yeah, but absolutely acknowledge that staff are doing their absolute level best at the moment, and those be kind messages are really important as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to pick up, there is a reality of the access and resource and capacity at weekends not being identical to weekdays, but there's also that's not entirely correct, Councillor. I mean, we've just agreed a contract around enhanced access around general practice. I mean, Neil may want to add to this, but there is enhanced access. That is something that is based around out of hours working. It's just ensuring that we can get the right. It's not always necessarily perfectly aligned, and in terms of where the demand is and where the capacity is. But Neil might want to add to that, because I think there is some challenges around Saturdays and Sundays, around particularly assessment and people moving through the system. There is less capacity, and we only have finite capacity, but there is also some access 7 days a week to all of the care we provide. But Neil might want to say further. He's got his hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, Neil, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Robin. So the partnership board a few months ago agreed the extended access, which does appointments on a Saturday and a Sunday, and we've also commissioned additional bank holiday GP appointments, which are aligned with the out of hours services, which is run by Local Care Direct. We originally commissioned for bank holidays 80 appointments a day, but we have seen demand for that, particularly in Calderdale, because they could only see Calderdale patients because of the system linkages, is significantly reduced on that. But the referral into that and the working from the A&E department and out of hours and 111 is working really well. We are getting people into those appointments and getting that weekend coverage. So there is huge sort of demand. Monday to Friday, 8 a.m, which is the usual, ring your GP at that time for appointments, but the appointments are being utilised, and there is work being done. GPs to unfortunately deprioritise some of the sort of the planned work that can get done at this time of year to ensure that there are priorities around coughs and flus and things like that. The only thing that I would sort of suggest that we're probably not covered is we'll be doing further campaigns around winter and COVID flu vaccinations. So across West Yorkshire, overall this year, take up is lower. It's still higher than pre-COVID, but it is lower. We still have schools to be vaccinated, which unfortunately aren't being done until January, February, which is a big sort of dent in the numbers, and hopefully that will sort of be progressed over the next sort of few weeks. But we will be doing additional campaigns to encourage people as much as possible to get vaccinated. I think disappointingly in health and social care settings, the number of employees that are double vaccinated is quite low. So we do need to promote that within our organisations to get that uptake increased.
Thanks, Neil. That was just a chair. My final point is I was going to add 2 more words. So be kind, choose well, get vaccinated. It's still time to do it. There is going to be some communications coming from James Thomas, Dr. James Thomas, the medical director ICB, is going to be writing out to both colleagues in the system and also the communities. There is virtually no doubt that we are seeing some of the impact of the rates of vaccination not being what they could have been. And that will directly be impacting on the system pressures we are seeing now. So if people would have got vaccinated when they could have done, and I mean everyone, we will have had less impact on the system now. So you are seeing people's lives being changed by that not being vaccinated in a negative way, and people coming to harm. It's as simple as that. It's a life-changing decision potentially. Not necessarily for you, because as we know it can be, but it could be for those around you, those that maybe potentially do get ill as a result of flu or COVID. Neil wants to come back, I think.
Thank you. Yeah, Neil, and perhaps we'll move on.
Yeah, it was just, we saw some public health data this morning of the winter pressures, which sort of show the number of people in hospital with flu and COVID is significantly up from the peaks that we even saw just with COVID. And yes, some of this is in our sort of frail elderly population, but it's actually in some of the younger age groups which are affecting it, particularly with respiratory and asthma type things. Unfortunately, the prognosis is that the current pressures that we're seeing in staff absences and attendances at A&E. So whilst demand is not up at A&E, there's not more people going through it, there are more people going with similar respiratory issues, particularly flu and cold. We're expecting to sort of see that high level for another 3 to 4 weeks before we see a sort of a tail off. And that's what's impacting on the pressures. And the pressures we're seeing, particularly in the acute hospital and GPs, is absent, not necessarily in clinical staff, a lot of people clinical working, but the admin that help answer the phones, that help oil the wheels and move people through the system. That's where we're seeing significant increases in absences, which create those designs. So it is not just about clinical and patient facing people getting vaccinated. It is people behind the scenes. It's the admin staff and everything like that, as they're the people that are significantly off work at the moment.
Thanks, Neil. And as Rose already mentioned, the planned work on promoting vaccination was quite interesting. If there are stats we can share on the proportions of people who are not vaccinated who are turning up as well, that would be helpful. But thank you, everybody, for that update. So what I said before about our thanks to everyone in the system for what's happening, and that recognition that this is an ongoing challenge is part of it as well. I think that brings us then to the final item, which is the forward plan. I think that's all straightforward, but Mike, is there anything you want to add to the paper?
Just to say, Chair, that the informal meeting at the beginning of February is picking up on the issue of sustainability of the local voluntary and community sector, which it felt we needed a more detailed on-pick of, rather than, as well as perhaps bringing some conclusions from that discussion to the next meeting in March, if that's felt appropriate at that time. The other thing to mention is that pharmacy has been mentioned 2 or 3 times this morning, and we are working at getting the other part of the informal session to be a discussion about pharmacy. I've got a conversation with Ian Holmes tomorrow about getting a West Yorkshire perspective on that. And we've tried several years to have a bit of a discussion about pharmacy. We've never quite got there. So hopefully we'll be able to get that in place and pick up on some of the issues about using pharmacy better that have been discussed and touched on this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Mike. And remind us the date, the February informal meeting.
I think it's the first Thursday in February, if you bear with me.
We'll send a note out reminding people in due course. Okay, I think that brings us to the end of the agenda. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time and contributions this morning. And I'll see you all in due course. Thank you, everyone.